Hello and welcome to another episode of Interview with Schizophrenia. I'm your host, Duncan Samuel Singer, and today I have the great pleasure of welcoming back Jasper for a third episode. Jasper is in America, he's Kentucky. He has a schizoaffective disorder, depressive type. He goes by the pronouns he, him. So welcome back, Jasper. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. Good to be here.
That's good. Okay, so with Jasper, we recorded 2 episodes with him last year. Um, he talked about the history behind the diagnosis and the illness, what happened. He gave what I thought was a brilliant description of the psychotic breakdown. Um, so Jasper wants to talk more. He's got more to say about the history and up to the present day. So Jasper, I'll leave it to you now to talk about as you wish.
Yeah, I wanted to just talk about the second hospital that I went to because I thought it was important to talk about a place that was actually, good.
Yeah,
Um, so I was there for 1 month, and I have oh man, everyone knows that American healthcare is an absolute disaster, but I have Kentucky WellCare, which is state subsidized, and it does cover treatment in Tennessee, but only up to 1 month. So I was there for 1 month, and that was in Nashville, the big city.
yeah.
Uh, I suppose it would make sense that they have more resources. Um,
So you would have stayed there longer if you were allowed to.
yeah, at least a few more weeks
Yeah.
because by the time they released me, they actually said that I wasn't fully cleared,
Mm,
but I was told that when I got home, I just immediately went to sleep, and I was just constantly asleep because of the antipsychotics. They cause, drowsiness, sleepiness, and
yeah.
actually, my cousin was graduating from high school right at that time, and they had a seat left for someone who couldn't make it to the graduation, so they just took me along, and I just fell asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried really hard to stay awake, and they were like,
Yeah, because I've had this as well. Where
"Yeah,
do you think it's a bit like narcolepsy, isn't it? Because
yeah,
yeah, I think if you get comfortable in a chair and you're dosed up, and maybe something's going on, which is just kind of monotonous. It's quite warm. It's just easy to fall asleep.
yeah." Uh, I'm glad they thought it was funny because they were just like seeing me nod off, and then they were saying, "Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Just go to sleep. It's fine."
Mm,
But anyway, so I show up at this Nashville hospital, and I'm still like rambling, like on the oh man, on the car ride out there, I'm just off the wall. I'm just rambling throughout the entire car ride, and actually, ooh, okay, so yeah, we goodness gracious. Okay, so we had we had to stop at a gas station because I had to go pee, and I had this delusion that um, I don't know. So I mentioned there have been quite a few abusive people through my life, honestly, and I thought one of them might have been in the bathroom stall, and I thought that I had to, this is really difficult to explain because it's a delusional state. So I mean,
yes, yeah.
inherently, that's difficult to explain.
It's difficult to
But
explain. But yeah, yeah. Carry on. Yeah.
yeah, um, so I thought that he might be in there and that he was like testing me to prove that I was who I said I was, because I am, transgender male, and like a lot of people don't take me seriously. And
Mm.
well, at least they didn't back then when I, was just starting the hormone treatment. And so I thought that I had to try to use the urinal, but I was still having the tardive dyskinesia, which made it very difficult for me to use any of my muscles, including ones that would let me go pee. And
Yeah.
so normally I'm actually somewhat capable of doing that. But on that particular day, I just peed all over myself.
Mm.
And I was absolutely shaking with fury because even outside of psychosis, I hate him so much. But anyway, I so I punched the bathroom stall door and screamed, and luckily it was a single person restroom, no one else was there.
Yeah.
But I I opened the stall and he wasn't there, and I was like, "Oh, of course you wouldn't be there," like the universe was messing with me.
Mm.
And I was just laughing at how stupid I was, and so I was just manically laughing as my sister and her husband were taking me out of the public restroom. And so I can't even imagine what the now that I work retail. Gosh, I can't even imagine what the the clerks were thinking. But um,
I think you see a
so
lot of things, don't you, in retail? You see a lot of,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
that's true, especially when it's a gas station. But
Mm.
so they put down a towel, and I was just laughing and rambling, and sitting on that towel all the way. And so I go into the lobby, and they pull you out into a separate room to talk about your symptoms and things. And I was just you know and let's see now, they so then I went off into a different room to wait for treatment. And to spare a few details, this woman came in after a little while, and she asked me if I had any spiritual or religious things that they could,
Mm-hmm.
work with. And at that time, I was like super, super into Zen Buddhism. So I said
Mm-hmm.
that I was a Zen Buddhist. And she said, how do we accommodate for that? And I said, I don't know. I've never been Zen in a hospital before. And, and she just had some kind of light bulb moment, and she left very quickly. And it took me a long time to realize what that might have been about. But uh, turns out they had a Buddhist on staff at that location. What they would do is, if they have too many patients, they will expedite some of them to other locations. But they had one on site there that was a Buddhist, and she was from India. And so they sent me up there, and she had told me that I was the only one in a long time who got her name right. And I feel really ashamed of myself that I'm not Indian. I wasn't born and raised into that culture in any way.
Yeah.
And because Zen is a Japanese sect of it, I suppose,
Yeah.
but it does have origins in India. So
Yeah. But the original Buddha was, and he was an Indian prince, wasn't he?
yeah,
Um, he saw, he saw death, old age, illness, and he wanted to do something about. It changed his princely life, and
yeah,
he became. I think they call it epiphany. He and then and
hmm,
he yeah yeah. I mean, I was into, but I've got a Buddhist history as myself. Yeah, I used to read about it, and it actually helped
hmm,
a lot. the Buddhist text. It actually helped a lot when I was younger in terms of guidance and that the wisdom that it taught me.
Yeah.
Um,
To derail for a couple of minutes and talk about that. So, the Western psychiatric institution is just now like looking at ancient Eastern philosophy and incorporating that into their treatment and things, and they call it mindfulness. But
mm,
the Eastern cultures, they have different words for it. So yeah, I suppose it makes sense that they had a Buddhist there, but so yeah, that all makes sense. But I was just really ashamed of myself because, well, especially looking back, because I felt like since I wasn't raised in that, I had a responsibility to be respectful and to be a good example. But I can't
mm.
exactly be a good example when I'm manic psychotic. I,
Yeah,
uh,
I think when you're in a psychotic state, yeah, it's difficult to explain, but yeah, I know what you
yeah.
mean. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I think, I mean, sometimes I try to feel better about it by thinking, well, at least I got her name right. Because actually, as I was leaving, someone else came in and who was um, an old, very southern, like, redneck sort of man. And he misheard her name as Susanna
Hmm.
and kept calling her Susanna. So, yeah, other schizophrenic patients, they mishear what her name is and they just call her that.
Hmm.
Um, so they had me in a room by myself, and they weren't exactly prepared. So I was in a room with two beds. I normally would have had two. Uh, normally would have had a roommate, but
Is
yeah,
it quite? Is it quite? Is it quite good quality
mhm.
rooms and that sort of thing? Is it like a? Is it modern and clean?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's just
yeah.
like I mean, because in England, in Britain, the NHS is yeah, it's not the same. You say American healthcare is bad, but in a way, at least it's modern, I suppose.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, that first place, it was the stereotypical, what you would call it, a lunatic asylum. Actually, I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but that place is historical and it was opened in the 1800s, I believe,
yeah.
and it used to be officially called a lunatic asylum. And so it's got all the stereotypical. It's got the barred windows. It's got the rooms with chipping paint and
Yeah.
nothing in the room but a bed. And that was the room that I stayed in. But this new one, it was basically like a hotel room, and it had its own sink and shower, and it was nice.
Yeah. Was it quite secure? Did they lock you in?
Uh, well, I think if I'm remembering correctly, they had the ability to lock you in their room, but they never did. That was only
Yeah.
because if they ever needed to lock you in, they would take you to the white room, which is, I mean, I'm not sure what they called it officially, but it's that stereotypical padded
Really?
cell, but it is actually all one solid piece of smooth foam.
Mm.
So, oh yeah, one time I was having a okay, so I was in catatonia for a lot of that month, and so because of that, I actually don't remember the vast majority of my time. It really doesn't feel like I was there for an entire month. I don't
Yeah.
know. I have no idea what was going on in the outside world while I was in here, like asleep mentally, but my body is still like present. It's like so weird. The only way that I could like gain control of my body again and like wake up was to get angry and agitated. But whenever I did get angry and agitated, they would, uh, that would be trouble for everyone else, and so
Yeah.
that really sucks. um, so one time I was having one of those angry episodes, and they led me to the white room and put me in. And although I don't think that they locked the door, I just stayed in there anyway. And
Yeah.
I,
Mm,
yeah, I was just yelling and screaming. And
mm.
I actually really had to go pee. And again, so I actually peed in the corner. And when they pinned me down and they said, uh, you're gonna have to calm down or we'll have to, they were basically saying, well, you're gonna have to calm down or we'll have to give you an injection. So I calmed down and I said, and they said, what happened here, what is this? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I had to go pee, but there's a bathroom like right next door. Yeah, I could have just gone in there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they do get quite heavy-handed, don't they? In
Yeah,
hospital, they're quite.
yeah,
There's a lot of fear, and they wanna. They I know they get pretty heavy-handed. Um,
yeah,
that's kind of like what I was because I visited a friend of mine in mental hospital about a few years ago, and it was so highly secure. It's unbelievable.
yeah.
It's quite a different ethos they have these days. Well, maybe it's always been like that, but
Yeah, it probably has always been like that, but actually, maybe the older ways they were a lot more reactive. Maybe they, well, actually, I vaguely remember like when I was in that old hospital, I was like making a lot of noise in my room. I was just stomping,
mm,
and they busted into my room and pinned me down just for doing that. But and injected me, and that was
yeah,
terrible.
that's heavy-handed. I would say that's heavy-handed.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
but but yeah, these guys, they're more hesitant to do that. They see it as a more, extreme measure, I think.
hmm, yeah.
So I, as usual in that second hospital, I always have trouble with people's names, and so I kept like coming up with nicknames for people. And one of them looked a lot like my great grandma, just coincidentally, and whose name was Dorothy, and so I called her Dorothea, and the staff thought that was really funny, but she was really offended by that. Uh, I, I I just have a flash of different memories here and there. I don't know when they happened or in what order, but she said that everyone there was respectful of her except for me, and I was really upset because I was like, in my own way, I was trying to be respectful.
It is affectionate, I
And
guess. Maybe.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
I think that is. I've seen that, like on mental health forums. Some folk are really pernickety about saying their name correctly.
yeah,
Um, it's like they've taken everything else away from me. Just, do you know what I mean? That sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. But oh yeah, and I was having a meltdown one time when it was before that. I'm pretty sure this happened before that at some point, but I was having a meltdown during lunchtime, and in some kind of delusion, I thought that I was being tested in some way, and they were handing out these takeout styrofoam containers, and I just took one and retreated to my room, and that ended up being hers, and that was completely incidental. I would only figure that out later. Um, but after lunch, a nurse came up to me and she was really nervous, and she said, "Don't you have food allergies?" And I said, "Oh, but they're asymptomatic." So when I was having my sister and her husband write down on the paper, medical information, I said
Mm.
that this is true. I have asymptomatic allergies to peanuts,
Yeah.
and the more that I eat peanuts, the higher risk I have of developing more symptoms like anaphylaxis. So I shouldn't eat it,
Okay.
but I can.
So yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Okay, I understand.
yeah, so she was freaked out about that, and I said, "Oh, it's asymptomatic." And so they are concerned about that. Also, I became really fixated on taking showers because I don't know, it helped me get back into control of myself without getting angry.
Mm.
It was really grounding, I guess. That's
Why were
probably
you
what it
getting angry?
was.
Was it what was causing the anger?
It was frustration over not having control of myself and my body. And
Mm.
whenever I did get frustrated, it would come back. So it was also kind of a tool to get control over my muscles, I guess.
Okay. And that was due to the Tarkov dyskinesia or the medication.
Yeah, it could be. It could either be like a side effect of the medications that I was cycling through, or it could have been a symptom of my illness. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think that it really matters, but
Were you having psychosis while heavily medicated?
yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was having a lot of delusions. That was the
Mm.
main thing. I don't think that I was having any auditory or visual hallucinations.
Mm.
Even to this day, I just have remnants of the delusions and not
Mm.
not anything, not any hallucinations.
In terms of your delusions, were they quite scary or traumatic or?
Um, a- hmm. Well, I guess that depends on how you look at it, because a lot of the delusions were thinking that I was being uh, watched after by a group of looked after by a group of people, and a lot of people would think that that is scary because the delusion involves thinking that those people are dangerous to you. But I
Mm.
didn't. I've always had a lot of faith in humanity. I haven't ever been a very um forgot the word, but
Conspiratorial, was it or paranoid or? I mean, it is paranoia part of the delusions, but
yeah,
I
I
suppose yeah,
have.
I suppose, like you say, if you've got faith in society, that helps.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I haven't ever had um you know this word for a hatred of humanity
Yeah.
and humans. I haven't really ever been that type of person. So uh yeah, it was I guess it was neutral.
Yeah.
But it was quite extreme. Like, I remember I have the same birthday as it's not Seth Rogen. It's who made Family Guy? I can't remember.
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane. It's a different Seth. Anyway, I have the same birthday as Seth MacFarlane, and I thought in my delusion that people had been really unfair to me through my life, and I thought that they all owed me an apology, and that they
Yeah.
all felt bad, and that they would come and personally apologize to me. And so I thought that since Seth Rogen had my birthday, that he would show up in person at the hospital.
Yeah, you said Seth Rogen again, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Seth MacFarlane. See, I'm really terrible with names. That's a demonstration. But so the nurses told me to go sit down at like the end of a hallway. And so I did, and I thought that I was sitting there to wait for Seth MacFarlane to show up.
Mhm.
And I was kind of irritated when he didn't show up, and so I walked down the hall, back down the hall, and then they had a code blue, and that is when apparently that must be when someone has had a seizure, and that was someone that was down in that hallway. And so I thought that it was my fault because I went down that hallway with an irritable attitude, and so I was really upset. And so I actually closed myself into the padded room as I was freaking out. And when I calmed down, uh, they said thank you for, you know, controlling myself and calming down.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that, well, that happened at least. But I believe I have a lot of false memories, and false memories was part of the delusions. And um, I believe I remember one of the nurses saying that one of the patients there was their sibling, and that person who had the seizure looked a lot like her. And so I also think that she really didn't like me and she was irritated at me. And I thought that part of that reason was because I freaked out when her sibling had a seizure. Uh, so I don't know how much of that is actually true. I don't know how much she might have actually disliked me.
Yeah, I know. It's like yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Like Ellen Sachs says, the schizophrenic mind is shattered. So I see that as well in me, where it's just controlling and getting clarity and sanity in our mind is not an easy task.
Yeah, for sure. But so sometimes they would have group sessions at night, and where we would go in and show each other our favorite music. And I showed this song called Pobbles, which is cheerful, and I thought that people would enjoy it, but it's high pitched and they were irritated.
Mm,
And she was the one who led that, and so she stopped playing that. But that does remind me that, so that is where the pop music comes in. I was very fixated on that. And um so yeah, I think I did mention Sophie. So that does remind me though that there was this guy. He was just constantly hitting on me, and he sat next to me when I was in one of those sessions, and I was falling asleep from the antipsychotic, and he woke me up. And I just, was really friendly. I tried to be friends, but he
yeah,
was, ulterior. And
sexual.
yeah, perhaps. Uh, but yeah, I noticed that men in psychiatric hospitals, they're especially tended toward flirting and being after someone because I feel like they've been convinced by the broader society, even when they're not in psychosis, that the way to solve their problems is to, get a girlfriend and get laid. And
Yeah, yeah. When I was in hospital, I actually did meet a girl in my second hospital, and I had a relationship with her. Um, but I never thought that. I never thought that I needed to get a girl. But I guess I was kind of maybe hypersexual as well when I was younger. I
mm,
think I think it is a societal trait where
yeah, yeah.
we're bombarded with sex cells, and
Hmm.
it does influence our minds and our bodies, like that arousal. I think
Hmm.
it will create that hyper arousal. Um, yeah, but
Yeah, that does remind me. A couple days ago, I actually did watch a movie called Vampire's Kiss, 1988,
mm,
starring Nicolas Cage, and that experience of psychosis was extremely real for me. Like, a lot of people think that it's funny, but I mean, it might have had one or two funny scenes, but it was just not funny to me at all.
mm,
Uh, One of the main things was that he was a very lonely guy, and the movie near the end of the movie, he has this delusion where he's met a lady who has all of his interests, and he's like, "Oh, I don't need therapy anymore. This is great. All my problems are solved." And so
Mm.
I'm like, "Yeah, that's quite accurate." So honestly, I would recommend that movie with its context in mind, that
Yeah.
like mental health crisis was a huge problem in the 80s, and homelessness and that mental illness were really tied. So
Yeah, it's strange, but like I think I read somewhere that statistically it does kind of remain one in 100, one in 200 in terms of schizophrenia type conditions. But I suppose I agree with you in that mental health is getting worse and has been getting worse in modern times. Um, just because it's a side effect of society, which is quite hostile to us. I think society has become more hostile in recent years. Um,
mm,
it's just a simple way to say it is that 200 years ago they wouldn't have had locks on the doors. 100 years ago they might not have locked the door, but these
mm,
days, it's all about security. It's like a
yeah,
fear based society. Right? Do you know what I mean? It's like we live in a fear
yeah,
based society where
yeah,
being afraid is the default condition. Um,
yeah.
and that's got to
Um,
have that's got to have an effect on mental health.
well, I also think that it might be an overcorrection from the days when the psychiatric hospitals were overfilled and crowded and very, very dire conditions to live in. I feel like all the security stuff is, an ethical overcorrection from those days.
Yeah.
I was gonna talk about one other thing, and I can't.
Okay. Cool.
Um, oh, but the it seems that this lady that I called Dorothea, I'm not going to tell her real name, but she seemed to have forgiven me because uh, they had this thing where if you were well behaved, they would take you down to the cafeteria and you would, eat your meal there, and it was like a buffet, and you could eat what you wanted. And it was down actually in a basketball court, which was split down the middle with a tarp of some kind, and little kids would play in the basketball court on the other side. And I have no idea what that was about. Maybe that was a children's hospital. But one of my delusions was perhaps, well, maybe there is a grain of truth to this. I wouldn't know. But I thought perhaps that psychiatric hospitals were about, tapping into your child self, and like you have now like mentally regressed into a childlike sort of state, and now they have to treat you like a kid and raise you up until you're
Yeah.
back to your adult mindset. So I thought that might have something to do with that. But we they play so there was this girl who was also like really fixated on relationships, and she was also flirting with me, and she was like touching me and being like weird, and I didn't want her to sit next to me, so I sat next to so-called Dorothea, and we had a
Yeah.
conversation, and she said, "I don't believe in heaven. I believe that heaven is a place that you have to create on earth, and that it's possible to bring heaven to earth." And that was one of my delusions, so we kind of shared that. But she also thought that she was like super into Naruto, and she thought that she had like a Sharingan eye, and she had me like look at it, and I just agreed with her because that pupil was like bigger than the other, and I was like, that counts.
Yeah.
But she said she was nervous because she was gonna stretching. Anyway, she said she was going to move to a group home, so I hope that she's doing well there now.
It does seem you had an attachment towards her. Um, it
Yeah.
does remind me, like I was in hospital about 20 years, 25 years ago or something like that. And there
Mm-hmm.
was an old lady in there who was friendly to me and I quite liked her in terms of like I sort of affectionate. And then the second time I was in hospital, she was there again, but she refused to recognize me. And I was really upset about that. But that's that's kind of normal because she was in an altered state.
Mm-hmm.
I was in an altered state the first time. But
Man,
I
sorry
do,
to
I
hear that.
do, I do remember certain people, who had an effect on me.
Yeah.
Even though my memory is really not very good. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think certain people do stand out. Um,
There were a couple of people who stood out at that other hospital as well. There was, well, I shouldn't tell people's names, but the names, are part of it. But his name was Tony, and and the second name, it just reminded me of breakfast cereal, and so uh, anyway, we called him Tony the Tiger after that.
oh, Frosties.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I eat for breakfast actually.
yeah,
Okay,
but
Jasper. I think. Is there you want to say something else before? I'm just. Um,
yeah, trying to keep it in a reasonable time. But
yeah.
so, another time we were in the when we were in the basketball court, we played a game of volleyball, and I only played one round, and I was really happy because like volleyball is one of my favorite sports, but I didn't want to start like messing it up or like ruining the moment, so I only like did it one time, and then I did stretch. So anyway, that's how that went. That's basically the whole story.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to your mindset in a way that sort of self, you kind of blame yourself.
Yeah,
Um, I still do that as well. And I think that's a trait in people who have severe mental health issues that they do tend to look inwardly and say, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that," or I've hurt that person, or I've caused that. And I've seen, I think that is a trait, a common trait.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, but like you say, like maybe there's two types of schizophrenics. Maybe there's a type who's got faith in humanity, and then there's that very small minority who he doesn't accept it, and that's when we get those awful cases of um, schizophrenics causing crimes and that sort of thing. But
Yeah, I
yeah.
can feel for that.
Okay,
Um,
Jasper. I think we'll call it a day here. Um, I'm going to play some music. What kind of music do you want me to play on the end of this?
hmm. You know what? I'm also into metal, so you can do that.
Okay, cool. Okay, Jasper. It's a pleasure speaking with you again. I
Yep.
appreciate your honesty and candor. I think it's really useful for youngsters, and it's useful for anybody. But in terms of people who are concerned they might be psychotic, I think it gives a good reference point to understand the mindset and understand how you might be thinking.
Yeah.
So I think that's really useful. So yeah, thank you very much.
It's good to be. It was yeah, I enjoyed the talk.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you everybody. Bye.